Hey folks, this is number 63, NixOS number 63. And in this one, I'm going to install NixOS 23.11 for quote unquote the first time. Not my first time, but maybe your first time. And we're going to try to get our system set up as quickly as possible after I install it to use Flakes out of the box, and I'll explain what Flakes are in a bit. This talkie script on the left-hand side, the thing that's entitled NixOS 63, will be available in a link in the description. You might just want to read it and skip the video because it's pretty exhaustive. NixOS has a bit of a split personality at the moment. When you install it fresh at the right now, current day, it will come configured in a mode that will soon become legacy. And the legacy mode is the use of this file called etc.nixos configuration.nix. And it houses all the information about your system and what software is involved and what your host name is and how your networking is configured and all that stuff. And when people talk about NixOS and say it's configured via a single file, this is what they mean. That's that file. And it's awesome. It works. But pretty soon, probably within the next 6 months, year, something like that, this mode of configuration will become deprecated. And something called Flakes will take its place. And instead of etc.nixos configuration.nix being the jumping off point of your configuration, it will be a file named etc.nixos flake.nix. We're in a bit of a weird interregnum at the moment where clearly this Flake regime is going to be ascendant, but it's still not the default. So just FYI, that's the case right now. When this flake.nix file exists on your system and you sort of massage your configuration to put some extra hair in it, when you run NixOS rebuild, it builds the system differently. In particular, instead of using channels, it becomes possible to use inputs that you specify as URLs in the flake.nix instead. And the reason this is interesting, one of the cool features of NixOS is being able to totally repeatably build a system, or 2 systems, or 20 systems, and they can be very similar to each other. Totally doable with NixOS, even without Flakes. But in the current regime, which uses this thing called channels, which are kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of like if you're used to Ubuntu, it's sort of like a given apt repository, except there's really only one. In the NixOS world, there is a huge repository called Nix packages that has like 80,000 packages in them. There's not like 100,000 individual apt repositories that are working to create a system. It's just one. And in the legacy configuration, when you install NixOS for the first time, it will use these channels. And the channels, of course, over time you can feed commands to update the channel data, and over time you will get updated software by virtue of updating the channel and then running NixOS rebuild switch. But one of the problems with this way of doing things, you can't easily unupdate a channel. And so if you update a channel, you're sort of stuck moving forward with the package changes implied by updating the channel. So, and also, like, it's totally doable to have a single Nix configuration, even in the legacy configuration regime, to drive the installation of many machines, not just one, but many of them. You can share the configuration between all of them. But in the legacy regime, and just because of the way time works, chronology, you might install NixOS on one machine, and then, an hour later or 2 weeks later or a year later, install another machine, even though it has the same configuration. It's probably going to get different software because time has moved on and the channel data has changed from under you. So the first system you install will have certain software on it, and then the NixOS you install from that shared configuration may have totally different software on it. I mean, it might look the same, but it's not running exactly the same configuration. With Flakes, on the other hand, like there's a lock file. It's sort of like a, I don't know, like people use npm or yeah, I don't know, but there's a lock file that has the data about which version control revisions of this, particularly this thing called Nix packages, which has all those 80,000 files, should be used to install software on the system. And not only that, but not only can you sort of, point it at one of them, but if your build fails, you can always back up to an older revision of Nix packages and install that. So it's just a more comprehensively repeatable way to build your system. There's various ways around this update problem, this sort of chronology problem about updates and channels in the legacy configuration stuff. But Flakes are the way to avoid the problem from the start, and they're future proof because the feature is being written by the core NixOS developers. It's sort of a fait accompli. It just hasn't become default yet. So, what are the downsides? Well, one downside of using NixOS in this Flakes mode is that the beginner documentation for it is pretty miserable. NixOS is really hard to learn. In the first place, you got to learn a new language. Then you got to figure out how to use the language to get the things done that you want done. And at the moment, most beginner NixOS docs don't mention Flakes because they're not default. So you may get stuck. So if you take my advice and you configure your system this way, you may be in a place where you get stuck. And in that case, I suggest that you either go to the discourse, the website, the discourse website, discourse.nixos.org, or the NixOS Matrix channel on element.org or element.com or whatever it is, and just ask questions. If you're trying to do something and you have some docs that explain it in the old regime, but you just need to translate it into a way to do it under this Flakes regime, totally possible to do. Everyone there will be perfectly willing to help you do that. They all know what boat you're in. And also, Nix is just hard anyway. So if you don't use Flakes, you're still going to be going to the same places and asking questions. So my opinion is, why not use them? Just if only because you won't have to convert your configuration to Flakes afterwards. It's all just Nix language anyway. Like, you're not going to miss out much on not using the legacy thing, and all the knowledge you gain is going to be applicable to both modes of configuration. So I say go for it. However, another downside that I think people just gloss over, especially people that are developers, is that if you use it in Flakes mode, you're going to need to know at least a few Git commands. You're going to need to know how to use version control, and this was not the case in the old regime. You didn't need to know any version control, but in order to use NixOS in Flakes mode, you have to use version control. It is required. So this may be a lot to take on board for somebody who's new, especially maybe who's not a developer and hasn't used Git before, whatever. But I think it's worth it. The upside of this stuff is that once you get into this Flakes mode, it's much easier to configure, to reuse the same configuration across multiple systems. So if you're not just configuring one system, you configure 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 200. This is a way better way to do it. Flakes are a way better way to do it. So I'm going to describe how to install NixOS for the first time. And right after we install it, we're going to switch it all around such that it's set up as in Flakes mode and not legacy mode for the configuration stuff. So let me start a demo. Okay, for the demo, I'm going to use a NixOS 23.11 ISO and just install NixOS via the GUI installer. It's very simple. I'm gonna use virtual machine here, NixOS Plasma 5. There are two versions of the installer. One uses KDE Plasma GUI and one uses a GNOME GUI. This is kind of senseless because either one you use will allow you to install whatever desktop you want. You can, if you use the GNOME ISO image, you can install KDE Plasma, or if you use the KDE Plasma installer image, you can use Cinnamon or a bunch of other, or KDE or whatever you want to do. So just so you know, you're not locked in. It doesn't matter which installer image you use. So I'm going to give this thing 8 gigs of memory, 2 and 4 CPUs. I'll give it 60 gigs just for fun. And I will fast forward through most of this. It's not all that interesting, but hopefully you'll get the gist of it as I quickly go through it. No virtual machines were harmed in the making of that video. We are done. And we can restart our virtual machine. Okay, so the first thing we need to do after we have our freshly installed NixOS system going is we need to start a terminal. In this case, just search for terminal here. It's console because it's KDE. And cd to etc NixOS and do sudo chown r xm users dot, and that'll change things such that all the files in both etc NixOS the directory and all the files in etc NixOS directory will be owned by XM, my current user. Okay, and these files were generated by the installer process. So you can take a look at configuration X. Had a bunch of stuff, less hardware configuration X, a bunch of stuff in it. Configuration X is the legacy jumping off point for configuration, and it includes this hardware configuration.nix in its configuration. In order to start mucking about with Flakes, we need to change our configuration.nix such that we can get into this Flakes mode. So the only editor that's installed right now is Nano, so we need to use Nano configuration.nix, and we need to let's go to the end of the file here, just anywhere in here. I need to put this thing in here. I can't cut and paste this because I don't have the proper virtual machine thing set up here, so I have to type it. But Nix package equals packages Nix unstable, and then we have extra options equal that experimental features equals Nix command Flakes. Yep. And while I'm in here, I'm going to add, let's see, stick with the script, Chris. I'm going to add Git in here. I'm going to add Emacs in here because Emacs is what I prefer to edit things with. I may not use it. The other thing I want to do, because I'm on virtual machine here, this is totally a virtual machine thing, but I'm going to add this thing so I can cut and paste things across the virtual machine and the host. So spice vd agent d enable true. Okay. Oops. I'm in Nano. I'm not in Vim. Okay. So now that I've added that little bit of configuration here that tells NixOS to use a version of Nix that is Flakes aware, And I've put that thing in there that I can cut and paste from my virtual machine to this other thing. I can run NixOS rebuild switch, NixOS rebuild switch. Okay, I screwed something up. What did I do? Configuration not Nix. Oh, it's because I forgot to close this curly brace. No big deal. Yes, please. Save it. Run it. Do it. I still screwed something up. I need to go back and Nix command. It's not Nix equal command. It's Nix dash command. You dope. Let's see. It is not Vim, Chris. It's not Vim. Yes, please. Yes. Thank you. There we go. So the final step is to do some configuration of Git, which we just installed by virtue of running NixOS rebase or NixOS rebuild switch rather. I don't think, even though I installed this, even though I installed this thing that lets me cut and paste between these systems, it's still not letting me. I think I have to reboot, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, now that I have rebooted, I think if I copy from here, I think I might be able to paste into here. Let's see. Indeed. Sweet. And this is just configuring Git for first time use. All right. Now we are ready to convert our existing configuration to Flakes. We have our Git that is required for Flakes, and we have our Etsy NixOS directory that is owned by us, so we can make changes to it as our normal user. I also have Emacs installed in case it helps. We'll see. So the first thing you have to do, remember I told you about this? In order to use Flakes, you have to use Git. It is not an option. You can't get around it. You have to use it. So the first thing we need to do here is make a Git turn our Etsy NixOS directory into a Git repository. We just do that by running git init inside of here. This is just nonsense we don't need to pay attention to. And now that we've created a Etsy Git repository inside of our Etsy NixOS directory, we can create this file called flake.nix. I'm just going to take this, copy it, and I'm going to flake.nix, paste, and I'm not going to explain this too much at the moment, but just take this literally. Like, you don't have to change anything in here. You take this and paste it in there, and it will work. So let's see. Okay. Oh, I guess I am going to explain it. Here's the script. Imagine this. Imagine there's a script to this. So you see this NixOS equals Nix packages lib NixOS system in here. I apologize if this is too small to read. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can make this bigger. Maybe that'll work. Yeah, that's much better. This line here, NixOS, you can't see it when it's highlighted like that. NixOS equals Nix packages libs NixOS system. This NixOS configurations attribute set, which is defining here, it's like a dictionary. It has a single key in it, which is NixOS currently, and you would be forgiven for not understanding what's happening here. But what it's saying is that if there is a host name, if there is a host with a host name called NixOS, use this configuration in here. And in the future, if you wanted to add another system to your configuration, like I was saying, Flakes makes this super, super easy. you can say Nix, like my other system. That was the host name of that other system. You could just copy all this stuff. Whatever my other system equals, and we want to use approximately the same configuration. We want to add some other stuff in here. Let's call it, my more config Nix or whatever. So this is the benefit of using Flakes. You can configure multiple systems quite easily on this. The reason this one is called NixOS is because that's the default host name that is given to the machine by the installer. So yeah. So actually, I'm just going to take that out of there. It's not useful, but that's how you would do it if you want to configure a different system. And at this point, we're going to try to run NixOS rebuild switch in here. Rebuild switch. Okay. This inscrutable error, which the first time I saw it, I was just like, WTF, man, like, what? It's there. It's there. I definitely, my flake.nix right there. See it? What it means is that you actually, because the Flakes regime requires version control, requires Git, you have to add your flake.nix to your version control stuff. And the mere presence of this file in this directory, in the etc NixOS directory, as long as you have that hair that we added, which is like the Nix unstable packages thing and experimental features equal Nix command and Flakes, whatever, all that stuff. Once that's enabled and there is a flake.nix inside this directory, it will be consulted. And so that's why it's failing right now. It's in Flakes mode. We put it in Flakes mode by adding this flake.nix to it. So let's try to run NixOS rebuild switch again. It's doing something different. It's getting stuff. It's downloading stuff. That's good. However, we have the same error. We have a very similar error, except it's against this configuration Nix file. Well, I'm not explaining how to use Git. It's just way too much. But if you run Git status in here, we can see that we have a flake.nix that's been added to the repository, but we have a few other files in here that it doesn't know anything about, the untracked files. So we can do git add configuration Nix, and configuration Nix also includes this hardware configuration Nix in its thing, so we have to add that as well. And now we can try to run sudo NixOS rebuild switch again. Switch again. And now we are in Flakes mode and we've succeeded. And now our configuration is being built by the Nix command that is taking into account our Flakes.nix. Wow. So the status of our Git is now that we have changes waiting to be committed, and we can commit our changes to our local repository here. Switch to Flakes mode, and now we can get rid of this flake.nix backup file that was created by Emacs, and we're good. So at this point, if you wanted to, if you like, you can import this oops, that's not what I wanted. This directory is now a Git repository, and we can import this Git repository into GitHub, or upload it to GitHub if we wanted to. If we wanted to share it with people, or you just want a backup of it. I have all my stuff in a public Git repository that relates to my NixOS configurations, because why not? You share with other people. Right. Okay. So over time, the way under the old regime, in order to update your software, you would run something like this. You would run something like, in the old regime, the non-Flakes regime, you would say sudo NixOS rebuild switch upgrade. and that would upgrade all your software based on whatever the current. It would first update the channel data, and then it would download all the change packages from the channel that you're on. The channel relates to whatever version of NixOS you're using, so it's sort of like like a apt dist upgrade or something. That doesn't work in this regime. In order to get updated, we have to do something like this: Nix Flake update. Is that what it is? And what it does is it changes this flake.lock file. If there are any changes upstream, it'll change this flake.lock file. And yeah, we'll see in a second. I don't think there were any changes. There were not. If there were changes, if we hadn't just, a second ago, switched the Flakes regime and got like the latest lock file data, we would see changes in there when we did Nix Flake update, and there would be changes to the flake.lock file at that point. But there aren't any, so okay, no big deal. But the pattern to get updated is to do Nix Flake update, and then once you do Nix Flake update, just NixOS rebuild again, switch. There's not much going to happen because nothing changed, but that's how that works. So that is the new regime of updating your system. I'm not going to go into anything beyond this because the videos are probably already too long, but there's plenty of YouTube videos about, and blog entries and whatever, about changing flake.nix to, you can use it to get old revisions of software, and it's handy. But what we can see is that the Flakes based configuration is really just a layer on top of the legacy configuration. We reused what it generated for us over here. Do cat configuration.nix. It generated all that stuff for us, and we just included it from our flakes.nix file. So it's really just like this layer on top of stuff that, it's all the same stuff. It's all just Nix, the language. There's no weirdness happening. So far, I've been talking like as if flake.nix is like a feature of NixOS. It's really not. It's way more general. It's a way to build software, and you can use a flake.nix outside of Etsy NixOS. You can use it to build other software other than the NixOS. For example, if you run this command here, run nix run and then this URL with this macOS Ventura at the end of it on a system that has Nix installed, you will wind up with a macOS Ventura virtual machine, and that uses Flakes under the hood. It's not Etsy NixOS Flake; it's another Flake, and there are people busy right now creating registries of Flakes that other people can use, something like that, to build software. So anyway, I hope this helped, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.